So our first fund was that we early stage. So let me just explain. As an entrepreneur, you have an idea. Typically in Africa, you've come out of corporate, so you've got about 10 years experience and you feel frustrated and you want to solve a problem. That's the typical entrepreneur. Whereas in the US, you're probably a college student, you go work at a startup and then you've got an idea. Here, we have very experienced early stage entrepreneurs, especially in the tech field. And they all come working from banks, insurances. They all have these major corporates behind them. And then you have an idea. You try to find somebody that understands tech, and the two of you typically in Africa would go through an accelerator or an incubator problem. There are about 78 really good accelerators in Africa, and that will help you build the technology and your business model together, and that's what they call an MVP, a minimal viable product. After you go through an accelerator, that's where we come in. We're typically called a seed stage investor. And what we do at Launch Africa well now is we 10x your revenue. So we don't look at pre-revenue companies. We like to see you as an entrepreneur, how you think about revenue, where you're going to get your clients. We want you to be in that process already. So typically you would have around $10,000 monthly recurring revenue, and we try to 10x it. So in 18 months to 24 months, we want to get you to 150, 250 typically of revenue. And we do that on a very programmatic support structure. So we almost run a program, and we hold your hand for 24 months. A lot of our companies either take longer, and we treat them more like SMEs, but there's a lot of our companies, about 36, that are more growing faster than that. I'll give you an example. The world's fastest digital bank is in Nigeria. If you know digital banks, the Revolut, Nubank in Brazil, they've typically taken around 8 to 12 years now, and they sit at around 4 or 5 million customers. Kuda Bank was started in 2018, so it's coming into its 7th year. It's got 9.5 million customers. And we came at a valuation when they had revenue of around $250,000. Now they're generating more than 500 million, right?
What was the evaluation at 250 million? Was it 250 million?
Valuation.
Oh, what was the revenue? What was the multiple?
The multiple was 10x.
That's a huge multiple.
For fintech and digital bank, yes.
So I thought we'd get away with a 5x multiple. So Hibari, just to contextualize, I don't know if you know who I am. Oh, you know who I am? Okay. Everybody here knows because I've asked a lot of questions and said a lot of things. But so I mentioned yesterday that Hibari is actually leaving to the States to go look for venture capital because we're post-revenue, seed stage, but post-revenue. Even though, I mean, we went big for a seed stage company on sponsoring, but we see potential in the platform, and we can see where the industry is going to evolve and where we can plug in. But obviously a big challenge in South Africa is getting limited partners into venture capital companies so that the venture capital companies can deploy the money into us because we'll administer the funds responsibly, we believe, and we don't think we're a crash and burn type of startup. We're a startup with an expert management team, but obviously the challenge is in finding venture capital companies in the seed stage. We have in South Africa a really evolved debt system, extremely evolved, extremely robust. Obviously interest rates, the cost of capital is very expensive from a debt perspective, but mostly when you get an investor in South Africa, they're looking for majority equity stake. So they would buy in for 51% of your company, and then you, as the management team, it kind of mixes with the DNA. So they're not looking at the valuations accurately, which is where I really want to highlight what Junaid and them are doing with Launch Africa Ventures is extremely important, and it kind of paves the way for more venture capital companies to be born in South Africa. Okay, so the next question would be, what is the average ticket size that you guys look at investing in companies? Obviously, you've mentioned that they have to have revenue. Pre-revenue, I do think, obviously, pre-seed venture capital companies are cool and necessary, but this is a little bit safer approach, even though there's a lot of risk involved. So what is the average ticket size?
Yeah, so on average, we come in with about 3 checks, $250,000. And typically, the companies have a valuation around 4 to 7 million. That's the average valuation that we come in at. If you look across our entire portfolio, the valuations is 4.5 million. So there's also obviously companies that we come in really early, but then they have some revenue, but they need a lot of hand-holding. So when we do our investment, we come in at $250,000. We then set you some KPIs, and we say, if you can reach those KPIs in this time period, it automatically unlocks $250,000.
So, but you guys want to exit in 2 years, so 24 months?
No, we want to exit by year 5. We're a 9-year fund, but year 5, the conversation starts to say, how can we find you an exit opportunity? And the exits in Africa, really challenging. So because we're an early stage fund, we exit through secondaries. So we've got 13 cash exits already, and we've given 10% of our money back to our investors. But it takes a long time because you have to work with corporates, other funds. And so secondaries is the only way that we can exit at the moment.
So do you think that, because in the United States you have $10 trillion of risk capital, where South Africa, I don't know, 1 billion rands in total, collectively, across all industries and all investors. So that's, it's not even comparable. It's not even relevant or measurable. We do need more. It is an issue. But do you think the evolution of an over-the-counter market can change things? Because in South Africa, you are private or listed. In the United States, you are private or listed on the over-the-counter market, or you're listed. So the over-the-counter market is like a cheap way that's transparent. It's not as regulated, but it's regulated, and the reporting standards are really strong. Do you think that could actually...
Yes. And I know that there are initiatives. I think the JSE is trying to do something like that. For me, is we need more corporate engagement. We're seeing in Africa that corporates aren't innovating fast enough, right? And they're missing the curve. A lot of African corporates have completely missed out on the AI thing at the moment. There's a lot of hype, but they just don't know how to engage. So everybody's like deer in the headlights, right? Let's just continue working on. You're missing on opportunities. The way you can do that is engaging with startups, either commercially with a contract or buying equity into that. So I think that is one thing. And then the OTC market is something that we need to explore.
So how much runway does your $250,000 provide companies on average?
Not a lot. But if you meet our KPIs, you can go up to 500. And then for the ones that we know is going to return 10x more than our capital, we put them up to $1 million. What we do as well is we work with other partners, particularly other debt partners, other working capital partners, and our investors. So if you're raising $1 million, we probably put in 250, but then we try to close your round with bringing in other partners so that you as an entrepreneur can focus on your business and not focus on capital raising. In Africa, people take 9 to 12 months to raise $1 million. That should be, that's a check afternoon lunch in the US, right? So why waste entrepreneur time when they should be doing what they do, which is grow their business, not trying to find capital to sustain.
And what's your target equity stake in a company?
If I look at our current portfolio, we sit between 3% and at the highest, probably 15% equity.
That's healthy. That's realistic.
Yeah.
Because we'd be raising like $4 to $5 million for 10% of our company. Yes, but in South Africa, that's not a realistic number. That's like, but also in the United States, the quantum is different for labor because you have a higher labor cost. So obviously what you guys are doing is capitalizing on intelligent people in technology, because technology is extremely low capex and opex, literally. You just have labor, but labor is cost effective. It's literally cheap labor in South Africa. So how did you come about kind of with this idea to invest in tech in Africa?
So I used to be an impact investor and specifically investing in female entrepreneurs. My mother was an entrepreneur, never got to scale a business, so I thought I'll solve the problem for future generations. So my first two funds were female gender lens funds, but you saw it's really difficult to scale an SME because often you're working at the pace of the entrepreneur. In tech and software scales, you can transport a business very quickly because sort of technology is often borderless. We're all using Zoom globally. It's borderless, right? So I think that in order to drive innovation in Africa, I wanted to scale lots of companies very quickly.
Don't you think that $250,000 is quite a limiting number for yourself and the investee company? And then well, I don't know if investee is a word, but I mean, for the sake of it. So do you think that having more limited partners in your VC firm would help to increase that number to, let's say, $1 million, where you can maybe get a little bit more competent of a management team or a higher value asset or something that shows higher potential? Or do you think it's not really like that? It's more like something could be super small and have really high potential?
No, you're opening a can of worms now. So if you look at capital in Africa, it's mainly funded by the DFIs, the Development Finance Institutions. There are about 80 active venture capital funds. I'll give you a stat. At the height of VC 2023, about $5.2 billion was spent in early stage technology. 5.2 is a lot of money. There were 800 investors. Of that 800 investors, only 80 did 3 deals or more, and of that, only 60 did 4 deals and more. And so you see this large drop-off. There's a lot of people in the world really curious about Africa, but I call it capital tourism. I'll just do one investment to see, and then I can say I've got Africa in my portfolio. So there are about 40 to 60 really serious investors across the continent. Only 4 of those have non-DFI money in them. And so we don't have the restrictions that the development finance institutions often set to the VCs, which is you can only have a fund of 20, you can only deploy when the capital is first close of half of your fund. There are many restrictions, right? That's why we have a portfolio of 165 companies. We've got our investors are predominantly individuals, family offices, and a few institutions, predominantly from Europe. So 48% of our capital comes from Switzerland and Germany, for example.
So commodities are obviously ideal if it's from Switzerland. By the way, has the session chair joined by any chance any of the other panelists? Okay, so we'll just keep rolling because, I mean, it's being recorded. So
yeah, so we have done a few investments now just to learn and educate ourselves, see what value we can add as investors. We just don't give money. So although we come in at 200 or 500, all of our companies, for example, gets free credit of $1.5 million from Google Cloud credits, for example. We do a lot of post-investment benefits to our companies, which quantify to about $3 million in total. It doesn't apply to all the companies, but we help you with your recruitment, with your tech stack, your cloud. So we try to pay for services with our scale. But we've done a company called Aspire Foods, for example. They turn water lilies into vegan cheese. It was one of our investments to get into food tech, but we quickly realized that the sustainability sector needs a longer capital cycle than SaaS software, right? And so we're managing when do we return our capital back to our investors, right? We have to give capital back to our investors by the end of year 9. We start in year 4. Aspire Foods have to jump through so many regulatory bodies, and there's always a delay. So what we're doing now, and why we're doing this commodity type fund, is we want to bring more innovation, what we call technical innovation, into the sector, but it does need a longer time frame. So our fund will be a 15-year fund, which gives product market fit a good 5 years, right? This is the right product for the right market. And then we can work around 7 to 10 years on scaling that business so that we can get return.
And what's your opinion about investment readiness of companies in South Africa? Because from our side, I mean, we're extremely equipped. We have our pitch deck, financial projections, independent annual financial statements, independent valuation. So we're going to the US because we're paying money to fly, and we have to succeed. So we're going to succeed. Do you find that companies in South Africa even have these things ready? Or because I think there's an educational barrier in terms of the fact that venture capital isn't some kind of play money market like in the States, where it's like, oh, well, we'll see if it works, if it doesn't, but also you have to have a competent management team, and obviously they have to get things done, and we need our money back. But it's also it's like almost playful in the States, where it's like, oh, there's this disposable cash, let's see if we build the economy, and if we don't, something else will work, and, you know, maybe 1 in 10 investment works out, 2 companies die. So educationally, we definitely need to work on educating entrepreneurs, because in the States, Silicon Valley obviously is huge. In the States, you have the investment side, which is your venture capital and private equity. And they're taught how to invest and what key metrics to look for. Obviously, and then on the investment side, people literally build businesses to be venture ready. It's literally like a game. But obviously there's the educational barrier here.
And it's a lot of education still need. I think there's a lot of initiatives. So the accelerators are doing well. The DFIs have got lots of programs. GIZ, the German DFI, is doing a lot of work. Education for us is a little bit more advanced than getting you investment ready. It's getting you, how do you turn yourself as a CEO from being a startup to being a CEO? That's our job, because by the time you raise growth capital, you need to act like a CEO, not just a startup founder. So we spend a lot of time. Every year we run a financial management program, anything from reading Excel and doing a financial model to financial statement analysis, right up to auditing, personal financial man. It costs us a lot of money. We survive on 2% management fees, but we have to do this education. I specifically spend a lot of time running a program called the GEAR program, for which we've developed. It's governance, ethics, accounting, and risk management standards. I mean, nobody in my career, and I'm a finance person, has taught me about ethics. Like, where do you learn that, you know? And so we talk about corruption, we talk about founders stealing money, but nowhere do we teach them how to make tough ethical decisions.
So, and a tiny step before that, how many founders rock up to you like, well, we have this idea, we want money?
We evaluate 600 companies a month. In Fund 1, we looked at 6,700 companies to invest in 130 companies. Currently, we've evaluated 8,000 companies, and we've got 165 companies in. But 600 companies on average is what our investment team looks at, and we invest in 3 to 4.
So it sounds quite positive then, that they are quite investment ready, and they rock up with the right documents and with the right... So it seems that the venture capital economy in South Africa is growing, and people are recognizing the importance of having investor assistance or investor partners.
And the accelerators do a lot of that work. So the accelerators, I think, so most of our, we've got about 48 companies in Nigeria, then Egypt, then Kenya, then South Africa. And so in those ecosystems, they're very developed in terms of accelerators, technical assistance.
And do you find that the sentiment about South Africa as a high growth, safe economy to invest in is positive? Do you think we're still getting there, or do you think we've got a seat at the table now? I mean, Switzerland is not easy to sell. Very safe money, very conservative money. But if they're investing in South Africa, that's huge. So what do you think the sentiment is out there in your experience with directly dealing with those partners, limited? Do you have limited partners?
Yes.
Okay, so is the sentiment positive about South Africa?
It's a tough question. My personal view
Africa.
is, if South Africa is run by little mini monopolies, you can see it in every industry. There are 4 big banks, there are 3 big insurance companies, the same transport and logistics, right? So trying to get into that sector to compete, very difficult. We've seen that with Bank Zero. We've seen that Time Banks, most of their revenue comes from the Philippines. You know, like if you're trying to build a digital bank in South Africa, good luck. Same with insurance. But what those mini monopolies lack is innovation. So if you can do business services towards those industries, very closed off industries, those are the startups that do really well in South Africa. So you, as an entrepreneur, you need to find out where is the gap for you to make money. For example, we've got a company in Johannesburg called Credit Circuit, and they sit between insurance and banking, and they do supply chain management in an area where neither one wants to actually do invoice financing, for example. And so they found their real niche, and then now I think we're sitting on 36x our money. So you have to look at the gaps where those mini monopolies are not playing or not servicing their customers well, and that's where the opportunity in South Africa is. Although we're seen as we've got very good financial institutions, regulations, I think that sometimes it hurts us. For example, we've got very stringent exchange control regulations. And so sending money into, especially outside of Africa, has really restricted South African companies to scale abroad. And that's one of the biggest challenges.
So a personal opinion that I hold is that money is also trust. Money is like a physical, not tangible. If it's digital, it's not tangible, but it's like a form of trust. It means that there is an idea that has inspired confidence and trust, and it's also trust of return is money. Trust that I will get something in exchange for what I'm giving. So I think actually South Africa has done a really good job at gaining trust globally. I don't think trust flows as smoothly and freely here as in the States, because in the States it's kind of assumed that, well, you have our best interests at heart and you're going to try your best for us as the investor to give us our money back by building this really cool company that does really well for the customer, the country, and the global economy. So, and in that, it's just assumed that people are not just going to run away with your money. Where I think that from a nation branding perspective, we are doing better, we're competing. But I also think ultimately the perception of a country really affects our ability to gain investment as individuals and companies. How do you think that we as the private sector can take hands with government to work on the perception of the country? Because you're literally selling the country to your investor. You have to explain to them that there's no lions running around here. Okay, you go to the Kruger National Park, but we have evolved systems. We have built up cities. We have an evolved financial sector and a commodity trading sector, and logistics and tech is booming. So how do you think we can gain more foreign direct investment into companies like yours to deploy locally to develop systems for the world?
I wish I had that magic answer. I think for us is telling positive stories. So the way we have been able to attract European, American, Asian money is telling our stories. There's a company just out in Stellenbosch. The founder looks and sounds like me. He's built this thing called Cloudline, which is addressing all the limitations that drones have. Cloudline is able to achieve that. For example, drones typically can only carry a payload of 2 kilograms, can go 40 kilometers. He's taken a helium balloon, Zeppelins, it flies all over Stellenbosch if you're out there, and he's able to solve real-world problems because he's able to take a load of 500 kilograms, and he can go up to 600 kilometers, solving problems for the government of Kenya and Namibia, taking food and resources, medicines to the most remote places. He works with MTN. He works with mining clients in order to do constant surveillance of mines. And so we tell those kind of stories. And people like the impact. A lot of VC in Africa is actually impact. That's how we track, because we do see, why do Germans and Switzerland give us some money? There's a layer of like, we've made our money, now we've given it back to the world, right? And so we capture it. We need more stories. Last week, there was a great South African story. A UAE, Dubai-based founder has been running this business in Africa, and then he listed his fintech on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. I think it was called Optasia. He raised $366 million with his listing. It was one of the biggest fintech listings. And then you saw the JSE volume increase the next day, which was such an amazing achievement that this fintech was able to drive an entire volume listing on the JSE. We need more of those stories.
I think South Africa's got quite a lot. We've got Takealot, we've got Luno, we've got well, okay, that I ran dry there, but these are two quite prominent ones. And then obviously, I mean, we are quite big in telecoms. Everybody's got DSTV. So I think we are making big strides in that. And we do have actually a good venture capital economy floating between Stellenbosch and somewhere in Cape Town. But it's a very small group of people, and the money is circulating, and now and then they trust an entrepreneur with some money. But what do you think would happen to the economy if suddenly 1,000 Launch Africas existed in the next 10 years?
Africa would be a thriving place, right? What sets Africa is our resources. That's why we are so focused. My entire job next year is going to change around this commodities fund that we're doing, right? We've got resources. There's a lot of movement in the resources to beneficiate. We've been talking about it. It almost feels like there's a movement in other countries around, let's beneficiate in our own countries. We want to capture that by bringing technology to fast track that. So that's why we focused on. The next thing is our young population, right? Launch Africa is doing a study on sports at the moment. There will be no sports in 2050, which is not far away, if we don't develop African sports, because half of the world's young population will be African, right? Average age in 2050 in Germany will be over 50 and will be over 45 in the US. We're getting younger. Currently it's 19. In 2050, the average age will be 15, 16 in Africa. No one wants to see a 55-year-old play rugby, right? So we need to develop talent, not only in sports, but across the spectrum, because Africa needs to be the workforce for the future. This is where we need government intervention. This is where we need global institutions to create those talent pools. And we're behind. We're quite frankly behind.
So how many of the companies that you've invested in actually crashed and died? And well, percentage-wise, I think is a more accurate answer. And do you think that you have the answer as to why?
Yeah, so all the answers has been lack of capital, and maybe the founder could have raised capital. Maybe the timing was off. So out of 165 companies, 11 companies have now sustained. So our record is quite high. And that's only maybe because we don't do it ourselves. We bring in our investors alongside us. So we have now deployed about 64 million into Africa in early stage.
Rand or dollars?
Dollars.
Oh, okay, makes a difference.
And our investors have come with half with that. So what we do is when we do a deal, we obviously get very favorable terms, and our investors come alongside us. And then we bring partners. When we look at a deal, we say, well, you're raising $1 million. Actually, you just need $250 for equity, because equity is the most expensive financing product. Here's 100 of working capital, here's 50 of revenue-based finance, and here's some debt. So we, from a very early stage, like a corporate, do capital structure, which in corporates would be your structure that you would be some equity, some debt, some lay junior debt, senior debt, right?
Do you favor companies that have a CFO or someone with an accounting background or masters in business administration? Or do you focus more on the actual product and solution, the product market fit? What is like the core metric that makes you select a company over something else?
So because we're early stage and we literally seed, so imagine we're planting the seed, and by the time the seedling, we have got this picture in all our offices about the seedling. We back the jockey and not the horse, meaning for us the entrepreneur is more important than necessarily the business, although the business must be sound. So we look at, towards the end of an investment due diligence, I spend a lot of time with the entrepreneurs, and I look, without asking direct questions, I look at their experience, how depth their knowledge are within a particular industry. I look at how they've put their existing team together and how they build their team around how they think about scale and tech, and often we would say, take us to one of your clients or take us to a meeting where you're pitching an idea, and I want to see how they talk about their business. Then we also do the exercise about money. We have a half-an-hour call with our entrepreneurs, and we just talk about money because we want to understand what is your relationship with money. We've had some entrepreneurs that stole all of our capital, just
Don't say
raised
that on
it and
stage.
took it.
Being recorded for Africa.
But,
we're trying to rebuild the brand.
But we also understood
Man.
that there was a very difficult relationship with money, right? And so since then we've got this process where we just have a conversation about it. We all have a relationship with food, a relationship with money, and we want our entrepreneurs to understand that this money is to be used for productive use, and we want more in the future, 10 times more.
So realistically, what I can imagine with $250,000, if you chop that into 12 months, which is what I do, and just chop it, because there's no point 6 months, maybe 8 months, okay, it could be 8 months. I don't have a calculator here, but so 10 months average, you've got $25,000 a month, that's 500,000 Rand a month. You could have a maximum of 20 staff on 25K Rands a month each. Your executive team, if extremely competent, might not work for that, because obviously they would have come from 500K, 250, 100K minimum salaries. So do you find that with the number that you're deploying into these companies, that the quality of labor that you're getting is lower, or do you find that these are actually some of the most resilient entrepreneurs with the most resilient teams that can potentially have the highest scalability at that number?
So ironically, a lot of British and German startups use Cape Town resources, right, because of the cost base. I think it's to the latter. We are very resilient entrepreneurs that are slightly frustrated about where they've come from, and they know they don't want to come back. And a lot of our entrepreneurs also got a point to prove, right? So I could work at an investment bank anywhere in the world, and I would earn multiple millions. I choose to be a VC in Africa. And so it also applies to me. What you find is that in the startups is a lot of our entrepreneurs suffer from the fact that as soon as they train their staff, they get poached by corporates. The biggest threat to talent for us is corporate Africa stealing people.
So retention, basically.